So just to give a little background, we looked probably a couple of weeks ago at image profiles, which is a PR sitting there, and it's probably pretty ready to merge. I just put it on hold because I came up with a few other things on the weekend to do with managing alt text and managing crop centering on images. And I wanted to just kind of extend on what we did with the profiles there. So the idea is now that I should start with the content type, the most boring bit. On, say, something like the blog, on the media field, we have two new options. One is allow alt text, and one is allow center cropping. So when you enable those, you get two new buttons here. First one, reasonably simple, just gives you a modal for the alt text, or in the case of multiple images, move that one away. You can also have the alt text for the second image as being different. So that gets stored in an array because obviously there's the possibility of having multiple images there, and we keep the indexes the same as the image array. I'll show a little bit more detail on that shortly. But the interesting thing that I've added as well is a kind of crop center. So let me open the preview so we can have a look at it. Get rid of that. So we talked about this, I think, last week at Triage, and I argued for an image editor. And then I sat down with a client to do some CMS training late last week. And all of the images on her new site were just out a little bit on the crops, and it got in the way of the training a little bit. And we tweaked them rather quickly, but we had to edit the images, and it was all just rather painful. So what we've got, I grabbed one of the sample images from the website, which applies on a banner. And so you have this nice little image here, but you've only got the person's head, which is just not what you want. So what we can do is just specify a crop point here, and suddenly we're seeing the center of the image, how we'd like it.
And it's because the banner, the theme defines the banner with a crop argument on image sharp.
That's correct. Yeah, that's exactly it. So the theme template defines what size this image is going to be, and I kind of probably see it as a function of the template, and the developer to say what space is available for an image. But it's a useful thing for a content editor when they are actually selecting an image to select one that's approximately the right size and be able to vary how it's displayed.
The demo effect is super cool because you have a preview, you click somewhere and you see exactly what will be rendered on the blog. It's great.
And it's exactly what you need to have, because you need to see it in preview, because you never quite know when you pick one of these what it's really going to look like in here. And I'll show you an example of when it would be just kind of wrong, or when your impression. So if for example we were to do something foolish, like try and take this vertical image and put it in here, then the image isn't matching at all the outcome. So if you don't have the preview, then you click here and you don't know what you're going to necessarily see or what size of the image you're going to see. But when the preview is there, you can just tweak on it a little bit.
So can we see the arguments on the image actually? Because now I'm wondering, should it be some properties on the editor itself so that you can see what it will look like? But if you say it depends on what you type in the image URL, then I want to understand now what you type to.
Yep, and that's kind of a point for discussion. So, and part of the discussion here we need to have as well is about disk filling. So if we go xy equals 0.1, 0.2, and let's grab that other image name because it's a home banner. So the arguments are a float. They're a multidimensional float array. So anything from 0.9 or 1 defines it, and you can go as 0. Detailed as 0.999, for example, or 4.5, because of course they're a float. So I did wonder about doing this. So what I've done is I've reduced what ImageSharp will actually accept to 2 points of the float, because the problem is if you put this one in, then you're actually making a new image on your disk, and if you put this one in, you're making another new image on your disk. So there's this kind of opportunity to overfill your disk.
But we have designed a solution for that.
And the solution was to remove those attributes originally.
Nope, it's to use but to use an encrypted query string that on the server side can generate and read and decrypt, which means when we generate the URL, so you type in your code, for instance, in your tags, in your shortcodes and everything, you type that whatever you want, okay? But because it's evaluated on server side, we can generate a query string that will be the serialization, the encrypted serialization of the actual payload for ImageSharp. And then when the request comes in, we can instruct ImageSharp to decrypt it and to read it in a different way with a command processor. And this way,
that's an option, yeah. You
can't make up URLs. You can only get them from the server side and let you write whatever you want. And that's and that's a way that should be opt-in when you write it, like maybe with an argument, which is foo equals encrypt or whatever on the URL, and then we can then just use this mode at that time, or by default.
So the encrypted values would have to be stored somewhere so that you could.
No, you just encrypt. You just serialize and encrypt this query string.
But if you encrypt this query string, you'll end up with a different encryption key.
What do you mean encryption key?
You'll end up with a different query string.
Yeah.
And this one will be a different query string again.
Yeah, but it has been set by the server side, so you decided what values you wanted. You get the security issue with the disk filling only if you let external users type URLs indefinitely. But here they can't, because they will say, you see,
because if we take this and make it a random URL, let me just understand what you're saying, because something, and if that's not encryptable, it just gets ignored. Not decryptable, sorry, it just gets ignored.
The ImageSharp filter, the command processor will say, I don't understand that, so I'm not handling that with ImageSharp. Go on, and you'll get the original file, like today.
Yep.
That's the idea. And it can be a custom query string, like it can be like not profile equals, but parameters equal an encrypted value. And if we see parameters equal, then we're like, okay, we need to decrypt it to change the command arguments live for the next filter to actually read, crop, with, height, and so on.
So that would solve that problem well.
All the problems. And all I've done in this case
is reduced it to 2 floats, which is still a lot of.
And same thing for width and height that we have to set up somewhere and to define. So if we have the encrypted thing, then you don't have to block anything. There is some cost of processing, but I think that will be super cheap because we've seen that even we can even cache the results actually, if we want on the server side. That's not an issue.
Yeah, so, I mean, decryption and encryption is a light process. It's making the encryptor that's expensive.
Yeah, and then I think that's really fun. We can cache all the things, encryption and decryption. That's not an issue.
I like it.
Okay. It should take an hour to develop.
Well, actually, it probably is reasonably trivial. So the other question that I've been asking myself about this one is whether or not this should know about profiles. I need to make that size better, but I'll do that later. Whether or not it's useful to have a selector here for which profile you're defining a crop center or not. I kind of think that's probably more than it needs.
So are you suggesting that not in this window, but in the screen before, you have a drop down to select the profile instead of selecting anything?
So you could do that.
But I don't see I don't like it because then it means it's a property on the field, some data, and then your theme will have to say, okay, there might be a profile, so let's use a profile.
And then it just starts getting really complicated, and the templates start getting really complicated.
So, even for that feature here, it might get complicated, no?
It's a little bit complicated, but it's not too bad. The template for this now looks like, find it.
That's why it has to be per field, because the theme itself needs to understand that this field can have cropping parameters.
It does. It needs to be per field. It's potentially we could store this information against an image. I did think of a couple of ways we could do that, but the more I kind of think about it, it's quite possible this image could get reused potentially, somewhere else on the site in a different size. So it makes much more sense that you just pick it there on the field. So code-wise, you've got the paths value, then you've got the centers value, and that just becomes another parameter here. So reasonably easy to deal with in the templates. And if it was multiple images, it would be paths. Because they're kept in sync. But if the field doesn't have that allow button, centers is going to be null. It's not part of the hard type model. It's just part of the JSON payload. I'll show the code for that. Oh, so the alt text and the centers just go as part of the payload rather than being part of the filter model. So it's not extending the model particularly. In the same way we did tags when we did the extensions on taxonomies. Yeah, so that's pretty much the demo.
That's cool. I will have a comment. The alt text might just be by default, enabled. I don't see why you will have to check to be able to set the alt text.
Well, again, it's something you have to deal with in your template. So
yeah,
if you haven't selected it, then and here there's no point in having an alt text because it's a background image. So why would you ever? You would never assign an alt text to this particular field.
Yeah, but
so you'd never want to.
Then
have this,
then I will disable it there, then, but enable by default because most images should have alt text by default.
Ah, you mean put the setting on by default?
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
And disable it for the background. Yes. Okay. And yeah. I'm not even sure that in terms of accessibility, you still don't want an alt text for a background image.
Well, because it goes on a background of, so you've got.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Are you an expert?
It can still go on an attribute on the tag that contains the background. It can be on the header. You can have a title on the header.
All right then. Cool. Let's.
And then maybe change our templates, or default templates, to use the alt text that you will now have by default.
Wait, the header should have contents. It has text contents, so that's the alt.
Yeah, I mean, the header itself should actually have some some content, but in this particular template, does it? Where's the end of the header? Yeah, header is here.
So it's simpler. Yeah, so you don't need it here.
Cool.
Do you agree with keeping? So, if we're going to say that alt text is on by default, would you keep it? Would you put it on the field as an actual hard-coded property, or would you just leave it as these extensions?
I think you can add it. Yeah, just this one, just the alt text.
Yeah,
No. Let me think. It's a media field. So it's a media field. Don't add it yet.
Yeah.
Because it's a media field. We don't say it's an image or video or whatever. It's a media field. I prefer not to add it yet.
Yeah, exactly. But arguably, any media is susceptible to accessibility issues. So.
But for example, if we have PDF files selected here.
But in this case, be careful, because a media field, in our case, can have multiple paths. Okay, so multiple resources. This is what our media field is. But how many alt text to add to a media field? As many as we have paths?
That's what I decided.
And now I'm discussing the strong.
Why would you have a different text per?
See.
That's
why
it doesn't.
Well, if for example you showed this, and if this was a carousel.
This is a media field which has multiple paths. That's
okay. Yeah, I see. Yeah, that makes sense.
You can argue about why do we have a media field that have multiple media.
That's another argument again.
It should be a cardinality of the field.
Yeah, so maybe it depends on it. It should be on the actual, not on the media field, but on the actual media themselves, on each of them. Yeah.
And here the discussion is that should we make the property inside the class media field, or should we leave it as a metadata on the JSON payload? And if you know it's there, you use it. It's not a mandatory property. I mean, well, if it's there and we know it can be there, we can put the property on the class for sure.
I would say it's probably shouldn't go on there, because if for example these were two PDFs and you were selecting PDFs, alt text is just not as relevant there. Or maybe, or another scenario, I've got one site where I host executable files. I definitely don't want an alt text on them.
Could it title?
In that case, I could use it as a title. But it's not something that particular site has any use for.
Yeah, call it alt text, because people who put a PDF file, they can use alt text if they want.
As the title could work.
Yeah.
I've put it on the view model.
If you change the type, if you change it now, though, well, it won't be breaking change because it's a new one. So the old ones don't have it. Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, it's on the view model, and in the template here, it's just accessible because it's just JSON anyway, and a liquid template.
Yep, I don't care. There are pros and cons for both decisions, and up to you.
Cool. Well, because they're an optional, and because the centers thing is very much an optional.
This one just stayed there like this. Yeah.
It
This
definitely
one,
stays here. Yeah,
let's center a PDF. Oop.
it doesn't make sense. Cool. Okay, I'm going to look into into this idea of encryption as well, because
there's an issue for that. I describe it.
Yeah, no, I haven't seen that issue, but I get the description. It makes sense. Yeah, we can figure out something there, I think.
Using the encryption.
Yeah, just using an encryption service.
And it doesn't have to be an encryption that is serialized. I mean, because it has to be because of cache. That's the only reason. But during an instance, it can be a new key. Doesn't matter. It can be using data protection keys actually, because yeah, you use the data protection keys.
Yeah, no, it would be definitely data protection keys, wouldn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
No problem there. Cool. All right.
Thank you.